The chair they gave me fit the way a bad decision fits, technically, but wrong in every direction that mattered. I sat in it anyway. I have sat in worse. The council chamber of the Quorum of 40 hung in geostationary orbit above a planet nobody had gotten around to nomming. Gray and still, through every observation port, the kind of world that had simply run out of reasons to be otherwise. Inside the chamber, the ceiling rose 40 meters above the curved spiral table, carved from a living mineral that moved through colors on the hour. Blue to gold to a shade that existed in no human language I had studied. I had studied 7 languages. None of them had a word for that color. I had noted this as a minor curiosity and moved on, which is a good general approach to things you cannot immediately use. The chair had been assigned to me by the Quorum's administrative office. By the end of the first hour, I had determined it was sized for a juvenile Keth delegate. The Keth were narrow-shouldered beings who communicated intent partly through posture, and whose juveniles were smaller still. I was 44 years old, broad-shouldered from a career that had required shoulders, and the chair and I had reached a private agreement. The agreement was that I would sit in it, it would resist me, and neither of us would mention this to anyone. The Quorum of 40 had governed interstellar affairs from this chamber for 611 years. In that time, they had admitted 39 species through formal processes of petition, review, and unanimous vote. Civilizations had been evaluated across generations. Documents had been filed, assessed, returned for revision, filed again. Humanity's admission had arrived as a 3-line entry under supplementary observer admissions, filed between a supply contract and a scheduling update. I had received 48 hours of notice. I spent those 48 hours reading every delegation file, 20 years of voting records, a full decade of public statements, trade flow data, alliance histories, treaty networks. I read all of it on the transport ship, sitting with a legal pad and a case of protein bricks because I had learned long ago not to trust important information entirely to systems I did not personally control. I had learned that lesson in a specific place, in a specific year, and I would not be thinking about that right now. The archdelegate of the Quorum was a Velhari named Sereth. She had the kind of height that functions as an ongoing statement rather than a physical measurement. Her species carried 3 pairs of eyes arranged horizontally around the skull, which meant she could observe the full chamber at all times without turning her head. I suspected she considered this one of the more satisfying aspects of being what she was. She opened the session in 7 simultaneous languages. My translator implant sorted it in under 2 seconds and delivered a clean summary. Welcome, agenda, vote schedule, a trade resolution from the Reth Dominion, minor territorial adjustments along the contested corridor, a procedural amendment to Article 14. Standard business. And then, at the very end, spoken with the particular lightness of something that has already been determined not to require weight. We welcome the human placeholder to this session in an observational capacity. The human placeholder. I wrote it down. Not in the session notes I would file later that evening. In the place behind my sternum, where I keep things that need to stay accurate without being softened by time. The chamber did not treat me with hostility. Hostility would have required classifying me as a relevant variable. What they did instead was quieter and far more efficient. They arranged themselves around my presence the way water arranges itself around a stone, not blocked, just rooted around, with the stone acknowledged once and then professionally set aside. The session ran 4 hours. I spoke once. A technician ran mid-session relay checks and asked me to confirm my translator settings. I confirmed them. That was the complete sum of human speech in the Quorum chamber on Earth's first day as a seated civilization. Under the desk, out of the sight lines of 39 species and 6 centuries of institutional history, I ate a protein brick. Shelf life 900 days. It tasted like a decision I made at 22 that I had eventually, after considerable review, made my peace with. It had never once failed me. That placed it ahead of 3 separate chains of command I had served under. Drath Kale, lead delegate of the Reth Dominion, presented his trade resolution for 40 minutes. He was an exceptional speaker. He cited 6 treaties, 4 historical precedents, and the weight of interstellar economic stability, and from all of it built a clean, technically brilliant argument for preferred Reth shipping access through lanes that ran directly adjacent to 3 human colony systems. A good argument, I gave him that honestly. I had read his file 8 days ago, 16 years as a fleet strategist before the transition to diplomatic service. The Reth Dominion had made that specific transition, fleet officer to chief ambassador, 11 times in the past century. 11 times. That was not personnel rotation. That was institutional philosophy. I wrote it in the 3rd appendix of that evening's report. Behind me in the observer section sat my aide, Owen Dre, 26 years old, degree in interstellar political theory, the specific kind of energy that comes from having read extensively about situations without having yet accumulated enough hours inside them. He was good, sharp. Still at the stage where he believed the right moment to speak was the moment when you had something important to say, which is a fine belief to hold until you learn that sometimes the right moment to speak is the moment that ends everything. And until that moment, your silence is the most important contribution you can make. He would learn. At the 2-hour mark, he passed me a folded note. It read, "Should we request speaking time for item 7?" I turned and looked at him. He read my expression. The note went back into his pocket. After the session closed, I found him in the corridor outside the chamber, keeping pace beside me. "They didn't acknowledge you once," he said, not angry, confused in the way someone is confused when reality has departed cleanly from every model they built for it. "They acknowledged me at the opening," I said. "They called me the placeholder. That is acknowledgement." That was an insult. "Information is information," I said. "What they called me tells me what they think I am. What they think I am tells me what they are not prepared for." He walked beside me for a moment without speaking. "What do we do now?" he asked. "We show up," I said. "We read everything, we file reports, we sit in the chair." "And that accomplishes something." I looked at him. "It accomplishes everything," I said, "eventually." He did not look entirely convinced. That was fine. Conviction is a thing that grows from evidence, and evidence was what I was in the process of assembling. That evening I completed my session report from my quarters, 14 pages, 3 appendices, full breakdown of the Reth resolution and its 8-year projection on human colony infrastructure. I sent it to Earth's diplomatic office. I kept the copy. I did not yet send it to Sarith's office. My quarters faced the unnamed planet below, gray and patient, the way something looks when it finished its decision long ago and is simply waiting for time to confirm it. I set my blade on the desk. It was old titanium wound grip, plain, no decoration, because the man who carried it before me believed in edges rather than ornament. 2 small marks sat on the flat of the blade above the guard. Not writing, just marks. I had owned this blade for 9 years and had never asked what they meant. Some histories have the right to stay their own business. I touched the grip once, briefly, the way you touch something familiar when you need to remember what it feels like to be standing on ground you understand, and then I turned off the light. In the chamber below, 611 years of institutional certainty rested comfortably in its own assumptions about what I was. I slept without difficulty. I always sleep well at the beginning of something that needs doing. 3 months passed. I attended every session. I sat in the juvenile Keth chair. I ate protein bricks under the desk. I confirmed my translator settings each time the technician checked the relay. I filed session reports every evening, detailed, precise, cross-referenced. The reports went to Earth's diplomatic office. Copies went to my own files. I had a system. The system was not complicated. The system was simply this: write everything down. Keep your own copy, and do not assume anyone else is paying attention at the level of detail that matters. Nobody was paying attention at the level of detail that mattered. The quorum moved through its business the way institutions move when they have been operating long enough to confuse procedure with thinking. Resolutions were proposed, amended, voted on. Delegates spoke at length. Some of them were brilliant. A few were performing brilliance, which is a different skill set. I cataloged the difference carefully because the two groups behave very differently when things stop going according to plan. I filed notes on all of them. The session pattern became familiar quickly. Sarith opened with agenda. The Keth bloc voted in alignment with the Marin Reach on environmental and corridor issues. The Velhari maintained formal neutrality on Reth matters while quietly providing procedural cover when the Reth needed it. The smaller delegations from the outer systems were watching two things at all times: who had the most votes on the current item and who they would need on the next one. Standard alliance behavior. The quorum was not fundamentally different from any other governing body I had spent time inside. The species changed. The machinery stayed recognizable. I noted the fracture lines. There were several. There always are in rooms like this. Institutions that look unified from the outside are, on the inside, a careful arrangement of competing interests held together by the shared belief that the arrangement is better than the alternative. Remove that belief from enough parties simultaneously, and the arrangement ends. I noted which parties were closest to questioning it. I did not share these notes with anyone yet. In the fourth week, the contested corridor treaty came to the floor for its first full reading. The treaty was designed to regulate shipping and resource access through a section of interstellar space that had become strategically significant over the past decade. It was a complicated document, 240 pages, with 17 subclauses relating to enforcement protocol. It was also, at its structural core, deeply flawed. The enforcement protocol in subclause 9 created a verification gap of 11 days between an alleged violation and a permitted response. The gap was not intentional. It was the result of 3 separate negotiating teams working on different sections without adequate coordination, and nobody had caught it because everyone involved had been focusing on the political language rather than the operational mechanics. I caught it on page 73. I spent 2 evenings writing a 7-page technical analysis of the gap, its implications, and 3 specific remedies that would close it without requiring a full redraft. The analysis was clear, direct, and correct in every particular. I had Owen review it for clarity. He read it twice. "This is good," he said. "This is genuinely useful." "Yes," I said. "Should I file it through the standard system?" he asked. I thought about the standard system. I thought about the folder labeled Human Observation Notes that I had confirmed during my second week had not been opened in 11 years. The folder existed. It was properly maintained. It simply had not been read by anyone with the authority or inclination to act on its contents. "No," I said. "I'll take it to Sarith's office directly." I did. Her administrative aide received the document with the professional courtesy of someone who had received a great many documents and had a very effective system for ensuring they reached the appropriate archive without disturbing anyone's day. She thanked me. She confirmed it would be reviewed. I thanked her in return. I kept the copy. 3 weeks later, the contested corridor treaty was put to a full vote. It passed with 31 votes in favor. 4 days after that, the Reth Dominion filed a formal violation claim against the Marin Reach for a shipping incident in the corridor. Under Subclause 9's enforcement protocol, The verification window gave the RETH 11 days before any response was permitted. The RETH did not use those 11 days for verification. They used them to move assets. 8 days after the violation claim, RETH fleet elements began stopping human freighters in the outer corridor lanes, not destroying them, stopping them, boarding them, confiscating cargo under a legal reading of the treaty's emergency access provision that was technically available. I had noted in page 4 of my 7-page report if the enforcement gap was ever exploited. 14 freighters in 6 weeks. The quorum called an emergency session. Sarith presented a resolution for RETH asset withdrawal and cargo restitution. The resolution was, in its structural framework, a close restatement of the 3 remedies I had outlined in my report 6 weeks earlier. No credit was mentioned, not even the incidental kind that happens when someone incorporates an idea long enough that they forget where it came from. I sat in the juvenile Keth chair. I ate a protein brick. Well, that was the complete thought. That was the entire internal assessment of the situation. One word. I did not require more. That evening I placed a transmission call to Earth Command. The duty officer patched me through to Cole Harron, the operational planning director, who I had worked with before and who had the useful quality of understanding information without needing it explained slowly. 7 minutes, I said, when he asked how I assessed the situation. A pause. You're confident in that window, he said. I've been counting, I said. 7 minutes. After that the geometry changes and so does the cost. Another pause. And you're ready to go ahead, he said. I've been ready since the first week, I said. I was waiting to be wrong. I'm not wrong. I heard him relay something to someone else in the room. Authorizations are in place, he said. Your call, Marshal. I had not been called Marshal in 3 years. Not yet, I said. 1 session first, I want it on record. He understood. He always understood. That night was the night I cleaned the blade. Not ceremonially. I cleaned it the way I always cleaned it, with a specific cloth in specific strokes, working from the base to the tip on each side, then the flat, then the guard. The process took 14 minutes. I had done it so many times that my hands moved without my active direction, and my mind was free to be elsewhere. My mind was in the corridor outside the chamber, walking through the session tomorrow, every delegate's position, every likely objection, the exact sequence of what I would say, in what order, with what pauses. I was not nervous. I had given this speech before. Not in this room, not to this audience, but in other rooms to other audiences, and the speech was always the same speech underneath the words. It was the speech that says, I told you what would happen. It happened. Here is what comes next. I am telling you this because it is courteous to tell someone what you are going to do before you do it. That is what the blade was for. Not violence. Courtesy. I resheathed it and set it on the desk. Outside my window, the unnamed planet turned below in the dark, patient, unhurried. I thought about the 14 freighters. I thought about the crews of those freighters, the people who had loaded cargo in good faith and traveled in the assumption that the institution above them was doing its job. I thought about the protein bricks in my case, the same shelf-stable decision I had made at 22, the same reliability, the same absence of complaint. I thought about Owen asking me 3 months ago what we were going to do. I told him to show up. I had been showing up. Tomorrow they would find out what that meant. I turned off the light. The emergency session opened at the 7th hour of the station cycle. I arrived 4 minutes early. I sat in the juvenile Keth chair. The chamber filled around me the way it always filled, delegates moving to their sections, with the practiced efficiency of people who had been doing this for a very long time in a room that had been doing it longer. The Keth block settled on my left. The Velhari secondary delegation directly across the spiral. The Reth section, at the far curve, last to arrive, Drathkale moving to his seat with the specific unhurried quality of someone who has already reviewed the vote count and found it satisfactory. He was right to find it satisfactory. He had 31 votes, and the Reth had framed this emergency session as a humanitarian matter, the corridor instability, the disruption to trade, the urgent need for a stabilization framework. He had drafted a resolution. The resolution would, when passed, formalize Reth authority over corridor access rights, which would require human colony freighters to apply for clearance through Reth administrative channels, which would cost them time and money and leverage in every negotiation for the next 20 years. It was a very well-constructed trap, the kind that looks like a solution until you have read page 4 of the 7-page report that nobody opened. Sarith called the session to order. Drathkale rose. He spoke for 43 minutes. I will say this about him without reservation. He was one of the finest speakers I have encountered in any room on any planet in any of the 44 years I have been sitting in rooms like this. His argument was elegant. His precedents were accurately cited. His emotional register moved from gravity to optimism to reasonableness, with the control of an instrument played by someone who has practiced it long enough that the instrument no longer feels separate from the hand. He was very good. I had been watching very good people make arguments in very important rooms for a very long time, and I have found that the better the argument sounds, the more carefully you should examine what it is asking you to look away from. I examined. I noted what the argument was asking 40 species to look away from. I wrote it in the margin of my legal pad. Then I wrote the vote count beside it. 31 in favor, estimated. 6 opposed or abstaining. 3 uncertain. The human seat. I counted the human seats separately. When Drathkale finished, the chamber shifted into procedural discussion. Secondary delegates spoke. A Keth representative asked a clarifying question about enforcement timelines. A Marin delegate offered a minor amendment to the resolution's preamble, which Drathkale accepted graciously because it changed nothing structural and cost him nothing. The vote was forming. I could feel it, the way you feel a current in water before it reaches your feet. I looked at the blade on my belt. Then I stood up. I did not ask for the floor. I did not wait for Sarith to acknowledge me. I stood up, and the room went quiet in the specific way rooms go quiet when something that had been classified as furniture decides that it is not. Sarith looked at me. Every eye in the chamber that was capable of looking in a single direction looked at me. I let the silence sit for 3 seconds. Not for effect, for accuracy. I wanted to be sure I had their full attention before I used words, because I planned to use as few as possible, and I needed each one to land cleanly. Delegate Voss, Sarith said, with the careful neutrality of someone who is not yet sure whether to be annoyed or alarmed. You are recognized. I spoke for 6 minutes. I did not argue the resolution on its stated terms. I did not cite precedent or invoke treaty language. I presented, in plain sequence, what Earth would do if the resolution passed. Not what it might do. What it would do. Fleet movements, timeline, specific corridor sectors. I stated that I was presenting this information not as a threat, but as a requirement of my role as a seated delegate. It was my obligation to inform the chamber of the consequences of any resolution that directly affected human colony access. Courtesy, I said, this is courtesy. The chamber was very still. Drathkale, to his credit, did not lose his composure entirely. He smiled. The smile was the kind that arrives when a person has decided that what they are witnessing is smaller than it appears. He said, the human placeholder offers a colorful assessment. 2 delegates near the Keth section laughed. Light laughter, the kind that has already calculated its safety. I reached down. I drew the blade. The laughter ended. Not because the blade was pointed at anyone. I set it flat on the surface of the desk in front of me, edge away, in the same motion my predecessor had described using it, an open placement, a visible offering of information. The man who carried this before me set it on the table before a session 70 years ago, I said. Someone asked him why. He said, because a man who shows you his weapon before the trouble starts is telling you the trouble has not started yet. I looked at the blade, then I looked up. Not at Drathkale. At Surath. You had my report, I said. You had 6 weeks and 7 pages of detail on exactly how this would go. You had the remedy. You had the timeline. You chose not to read it. Surath held my gaze. I am not angry about that, I said. I am informing you of what follows now that we are past the point where reading it would have mattered. I let that settle. 7 days, I said. That is the window in which the resolution can be withdrawn without what comes next. 7 days. I sat down. I picked up the blade. I resheathed it without looking at it, the way you do a thing you have done enough times that your hands simply know. The chamber did not break into immediate noise. It sat with the weight of what I had said, the way a room sits after something changes the air in it. Then Drathkale said something to a colleague in a low voice that my implant caught at partial volume. What he said was not important. What was important was the colleague's expression when he said it. The colleague did not laugh. Owen, behind me in the observer section, passed me nothing, no note, no question. He understood. The session continued for another 90 minutes and concluded without a vote on Drathkale's resolution, as procedural rules required a 24-hour review period following a formal delegate statement of consequence. I ate a protein brick in the corridor outside. New supply batch, slightly different formula from the previous case. I preferred the original. Some things improve with familiarity and do not benefit from adjustment. The first thing that happened on day 1 was nothing visible. That was how it was supposed to go. I sat in the delegate lounge of the quorum station and ate breakfast and read the morning briefing reports and answered 3 messages from Earth's diplomatic office asking for clarification on my statement of the previous session. I gave them the same clarification each time, in slightly different arrangements of the same words, because the question they were actually asking was whether I had the authority to say what I said, and the answer to that was also yes, and I was willing to keep confirming it until they stopped asking. Owen brought me a second cup of something that the station dispensary classified as coffee, and that I had made my peace with over the 3 months of its daily company. "Anything yet?" he asked. "Not yet," I said. "How long?" he said. I drank the coffee. 2 days before the first visible movement, I said. 1 day after that before the quorum starts calling for talks. 4 days before Drathkale calls me directly. He looked at me. "You've done this before," he said. It was not quite a question. "Similar geometry," I said. "Different species. The architecture is the same." He sat with that. "Should I be scared?" he said. I looked at him. "No," I said. "Fear costs attention. Pay attention instead." He nodded and went back to his desk in the corner of the lounge. I went back to my reading. On day 2, the thing that happened was still mostly invisible from the quorum chamber. What it looked like, if you were watching the right data feeds, which I was the repositioning of 6 Reth patrol elements in the outer contested corridor lanes. The repositioning was framed in their filed movement reports as routine cycle rotation. It was not routine. It was the beginning of consolidation, which is what a force does when it has decided it may need to defend a position rather than advance from it. I noted it without expression. Nadia Fenn, the second human delegate who had joined my staff 4 weeks earlier, leaned across the lounge table and said, "Marshal Voss, 3 different delegations have sent informal requests for a meeting. The Keth Secondary Bloc, the Outer System Coalition, and the Marin Reach." "Thank you, Nadia," I said. "Which ones do we meet with?" she asked. "None of them yet," I said. She processed that. "They want to know what we're doing," she said. "I know," I said. "Shouldn't we tell them?" "They can read my statement from yesterday's session," I said. "Everything I am doing is in that statement. I said it clearly and I said it in the chamber. If they want a private meeting where I say different things, they will be disappointed." She looked at me for a moment. "What if they want to help?" she said. "They want to manage the situation," I said. "Those are different things. Helpful people offer resources. People who want to manage the situation offer meetings." She nodded slowly and went to draft polite deferrals. On day 3, the Wrath Dominion's 3 lead patrol vessels in the Eastern Corridor began active positioning. I received this information from Cole Heron's office in a 2-line message. I sent back 3 words: "Proceed as planned." I ate lunch. The station cafeteria on the human-compatible level had introduced a new item to the menu that week, something textured, protein-based, moderately seasoned. I ate it without complaint. It was not as reliable as the protein bricks, but it was warm, which was something. In the afternoon session, Sareth presented a procedural motion to delay votes on the contested corridor until a special mediation committee could be formed. I voted no. I was the only vote against. 38 in favor of the delay. 1 abstention from a small outer system delegation that appeared to be gathering information before committing to any position, which I respected as a strategy. The motion passed. The mediation committee would require 3 sessions to constitute, then a schedule, then a process. 3 weeks minimum. I did not have 3 weeks in my stated window. Neither did they. On day 4, the quorum held an informal session outside the scheduled agenda. 7 factions were present. Sareth chaired it. I was invited through a formal note delivered to my quarters at 6 in the morning. I attended. Sareth opened by nodding that the current situation represented an escalating concern requiring coordinated response. I noted that I had outlined a coordinated response 7 pages long 6 weeks prior. The room went briefly silent. Sareth said that the committee was prepared to offer a revised framework that addressed the core concerns raised in my session statement. I asked if the revised framework included removal of the enforcement gap in subclause 9. A representative from the Keth block said that the committee had not yet had time to review the full technical detail of the gap. I said 6 weeks and 7 pages. The Keth representative said they understood the frustration. I said I was not frustrated. I said I was informing the committee of the specific technical item that needed to be resolved, the same item I had outlined in the report, so that the committee could address it efficiently. I said 3 days remaining. The room was quiet. Drathkale was not in the informal session. He had sent a proxy, a younger Reth delegate who was visibly uncomfortable and doing his job regardless, which I noted with a small measure of respect. The proxy said that the Wrath Dominion was open to a negotiated resolution. I said the terms were the same as those I had stated in the formal session. I said I had thought them through carefully before statting them, which was how I preferred to do things, and that I did not change stated terms during a process, because if I did, my stated terms would not mean anything in any future process. The proxy said he would relay this. I thanked him. I left the informal session and went back to the lounge. I ate a protein brick. Original formula. The new ones had a slightly different texture that I continued to consider unnecessary. Owen was waiting for me. He had a particular expression that I had learned to read over 3 months, the expression of someone who has been tracking multiple data streams and has arrived at a number that concerns him. 12 ships, he said quietly. I know, I said. That's a significant escalation from yesterday's count. Yes, I said. He looked at me. You knew this was coming, he said. I planned for it, I said. Not quite the same thing. What's the difference? I thought about that for a moment, not because the answer was complicated, because I wanted to say it correctly. Knowing something is coming means you saw it, I said. Planning for it means you prepared for it whether you saw it or not. I have been preparing for this since week 1 of this posting, not because I knew, because it was possible. He was quiet. That's a lonely way to spend 3 months, he said. It's a useful way, I said. On day 5, Drathkale called. I took the call in my quarters, standing. I always stood for calls where I might need to say a difficult thing, because standing makes difficult things easier to say with the right amount of weight and the right amount of calm at the same time. Delegate Voss, he said. His voice was different from the chamber voice. The architecture of it was the same, controlled, trained, careful, but something beneath the architecture had shifted. The foundation had developed a hairline crack. Ambassador Drathkale, I said. I think we are both aware, he said, that the current situation can be resolved without further escalation. I think the same thing, I said. A brief pause. Then you would be open to a negotiated adjustment to the corridor framework, he said. The terms are the same ones I stated in the session, I said. I have not changed them because they were correct when I stated them. They are still correct. Delegate Voss, he paused, those terms are very broad. I know, I said. They are broad because the problem was broad. Your people stopped 14 human freighters, 14 crews, 14 cargo manifests. The terms address the actual scale of the situation. Silence. I hear what you are saying, he said. I know, I said. I'll be in session tomorrow. I ended the call. I sat down on the edge of the desk. I picked up the blade, not to clean it, not to examine it, just held it across both palms the way you hold something when you are thinking about what it represents rather than what it is. I thought about my father. He had worked ore extraction for 31 years on a dying industrial planet in a system that the galaxy had finished being interested in before I was born. He had hands that were built by the work, wide, scarred, capable of things that looked impossible until you watched him do them. He used to say, quiet men are not weak men. They are men who have already had the argument in their head and know how it ends. What you see on the outside is not silence. It is patience. I had never told him he was right. He had been gone 19 years. I set the blade down. Outside my window, the unnamed planet turned in the dark below, patient, without urgency, having already decided everything it needed to decide. On day 6, the Wreth Dominion filed a formal withdrawal of the contested corridor resolution. The withdrawal was accompanied by a statement of willingness to negotiate cargo restitution for the 14 freighters, and a request for the formation of a new treaty committee with human delegation, included as a primary participant rather than an observer. Drathkale did not attend the session in person. He sent the proxy. I attended in person. I sat in the juvenile Keth chair for the last time. I set the blade on the desk in front of me, flat edge away. Nobody laughed. Nobody made a sound. After the session closed, I cleaned the blade in my quarters and resheathed it and sat with my legal pad and wrote the evening report. The report was 8 pages, 3 appendices. I sent it to Earth's diplomatic office. I kept the copy. I ate the last original formula protein brick from my case. I had been rationing them. Some reliable things deserve to be preserved. The conduct inquiry was scheduled for the 3rd day after the withdrawal. Technically, drawing any weapon in the quorum chamber violated Article 7 of the Chamber Conduct Charter. The violation carried a range of possible sanctions, from a formal notation in the delegate record to temporary suspension of voting rights. Sareth had convened the inquiry within 24 hours of the resolution withdrawal, which was prompt, which was efficient, and which everyone in the chamber understood to be a procedural exercise designed to give the quorum a formal closure point without requiring anyone to confront what had actually happened. I understood that too. I attended. I sat in the chair they provided for the inquiry, which was a standard quorum administrative chair, sized for a broad range of species, adequately fitted. I noted this without sentiment. 3 factions presented arguments for formal censure. Their arguments were technically coherent and politically motivated, which is a combination that does not age well under direct examination. 6 factions argued for dismissal of the inquiry on the grounds of extenuating circumstances, a position they had arrived at after reviewing what the corridor situation would have looked like at month 4 with the RETH resolution in place and no intervention. The math had been instructive for them. I sat through it all without speaking until I was directly asked a question, and when I was asked questions, I answered them with the minimum number of words the question required. The lead inquiry officer, a Velhari administrative delegate named Orith, asked me to describe my reasoning for the weapon display in the session. I said, I wanted the chamber to understand that I was showing them something before any difficulty arose. That is a form of courtesy. Orith looked at me over his record display. Courtesy, he said. Yes, I said. He wrote something down. After the formal session, as delegates were clearing the chamber, Sareth approached me. This was unusual. Sareth did not approach people. People were brought to Sareth through appropriate channels at scheduled times. The 3 pairs of eyes, the Velhari height, the 6 centuries of institutional identity she embodied, these were not things that moved casually across a room toward a junior delegate from a supplementary observer species. She moved across the room toward me. I waited. Delegate Voss, she said. Archdelegate, I said. She stood beside me for a moment, looking at the chamber rather than at me, which I took as a signal that this was a private conversation rather than an official one, and adjusted my posture accordingly. I have a question, she said. It is not part of the inquiry. Ask it, I said. Why did you not demonstrate your capability earlier, she said. If you had the analysis from the beginning, if you had the operational planning from the beginning, why wait? Why 3 months of sitting in a chair and filing reports that were not read? I thought about that. Not because the answer required thought. I knew the answer. I was deciding how much of it to give her, and I decided to give her all of it, because she was asking in good faith, and because the answer mattered, and because I was tired, in the specific and particular way that comes not from lack of sleep, but from doing the right thing inside a system that was designed to make the right thing harder than it needed to be. Did you read the report? I asked. She was quiet for a moment. No, she said. I received it, I did not read it. I nodded. I waited 3 months, I said, because I was trying to do it the correct way, file the analysis, present the data, let the institution do what institutions exist to do, give it the information it needed to avoid what happened. She turned and looked at me directly. The institution failed, she said. Yes, I said. And then you acted. Yes, I said. When the correct process is exhausted and the thing it was designed to prevent has already begun, you stop repeating the process and you do what needs doing. Sarith was quiet. You could have done it from the beginning, she said. You had the capability. I could have, I said. I have been in situations where I did, where I acted first and let the process catch up after. There is a place called Gable's Fork in a system that does not appear on most current charts. 900 people lived there. I had the capability to stop what was coming to them at the outer edge of the system clean before anything reached the settlement. My command said wait for authorization. I waited. I followed the correct process. I paused. Gable's fork is not there anymore, I said. Sareth was very still. I waited 3 months here, I said, because I was trying to do it right. I had learned what it costs to go too fast. I had not yet fully learned what it costs to go too slow. Now I know both. I carry them both. I was quiet. The 14 freighters, she said. Yes, I said. She looked at the chamber around us, the empty sections, the mineral ceiling cycling through its colors overhead, the 611 years of accumulated governance that filled the room the way air fills a space without being visible. I should have read the report, she said. Yes, I said, you should have. There was no anger in it, no satisfaction either, just accuracy. She looked at me for a long moment. We are going to restructure the observer admission process, she said. There will be a formal review of how supplementary admissions are handled. That would be useful, I said. The human delegation status is being reviewed as well, she said. The committee recommended a reclassification. I looked at her. To what? I said. Article 1 standing, she said. Primary delegate status, same tier as founding members. I said nothing for a moment. That was not something I asked for, I said. No, she said. It was not given because you asked for it. I understood that. Nadia found me 20 minutes later in the corridor outside the chamber. She had been at the inquiry session but had waited outside the private conversation, which showed good judgment. How did it go? She asked. Fine, I said. And the meeting with Sareth? Fine, I said. She waited, knowing me well enough by now to know that fine was the full answer, and that more detail would arrive in its own time or not at all. Your chair, she said. I looked at her. In the chamber, she said. They replaced it this morning. The administrative office sent a crew. Same spiral position, same section, different chair. I was quiet. Standard size, I said. Standard size, she said. I thought about that. The juvenile Keth chair, 93 days of sitting in it. The back disagreement that I had refused to acknowledge. The protein bricks eaten below the sight line of 39 civilizations and 6 centuries of institutional certainty. The new chair fit. I noted this. I did not make more of it than it was. Owen was waiting at the end of the corridor with a message from Cole Heron confirming full operational stand-down and a request for a debrief call at my convenience. At my convenience. I had not been asked things at my convenience in a very long time. That evening I cleaned the blade for the last time in those quarters. Same cloth, same strokes. I had submitted the amended charter compliance form on my first day in the quorum, the blade listed as a cultural diplomatic artifact under Article 15, pending administrative review. The approval had come back 11 days ago, 3 months after filing, cleared by a clerk in the quorum administrative office who had processed it in under 15 minutes. 11 minutes actually. I had checked the timestamp. Planning ahead is just waiting with a purpose. My father would have had something to say about that. He had something to say about most things. He said them quietly, in the way of a man who understood that the value of a statement is not in how loud it arrives, but in whether it is still standing after everything around it has been tested. He had been gone 19 years. I had been meaning to tell him he was right. I put the blade away. I filed my evening report, 12 pages, 2 appendices. The corrected subclause 9 framework, as agreed. The cargo restitution schedule for the 14 freighters, the preliminary outline of the new Article 1 standing process and what it would require from Earth's diplomatic staff. I sent it to Earth's diplomatic office. I sent a copy to Sareth's office. I kept the copy in my own files. Owen knocked on the door at 9 in the evening. Nadia and I were going to eat in the level 3 cafeteria, he said, if you wanted to join us. I looked at him. He had grown in 3 months in the way that people grow when they have been inside difficult situations long enough to stop being surprised by them and start learning from them. He would be a good diplomat. He already was, in the ways that were not yet visible to him. The new menu item, I said. Apparently they have the warm one again, he said. I put down the legal pad. Give me 5 minutes, I said. The unnamed planet below my window turned in the dark as I put on my jacket, patient, unhurried, the way things look when they have already made their decision and are simply waiting for time to confirm it. I had made my decisions a long time ago. At Gable's Fork, in the silence that followed, I had decided what kind of man I was going to be. I had decided I would not move too fast, and I would not wait too long, and I would give every system every chance it deserved before I stepped outside of it. I had given the quorum 3 months. They had needed 6 days. They called me the silent one like it was a flaw. I have been called worse by people who are not here anymore. I turned off the light. I went to dinner,